Hey, how's it going, guys? Thanks for coming back to my vlog. Today I have a really exciting episode. I'm going to share with you the overview of what goes into purchasing your own property. So I'm actually sitting in my very own condo that I just bought a couple weeks ago. Super stoked on it, and it's been a really long time coming. Like, there's been a lot of learning that went into this whole process for me because this is my first property. And I think there's a lot of people out there that don't know exactly what goes into buying a property, like what are the steps to take, and it can feel overwhelming. So what I want to do in this video is just sort of walk through the basics of each individual part of purchasing a home, from the beginning of the process all the way to the end when you actually get the keys and can start moving in and all that good stuff. Now, I do have a link in the description section below to a getting started article that I wrote about purchasing a home or a condo or any kind of property. So that article is going to walk through the steps of what I took when I first started to explore purchasing a property. Check that out. So the very first step of purchasing a property or beginning to look into purchasing a property is to really decide, are you ready for this decision? Are you in a position where you can take on a mortgage? A mortgage, unlike rent, has a lot more weight in terms of your credit. Not to mention, if you default on a mortgage, there are a lot of other ramifications that come with it. So you have to make sure that you're in a good financial position. Now, for each person, that varies, right? Do you need surplus amounts of money for personal spend? Or can you get by with maybe a little less, right? I'll give you an example from my experience. The mortgage I have is actually a little less than what I was paying for an apartment in Seattle. So I actually ended up saving a little bit of money, which worked out great for me, right? Because really, at the end of the day, purchasing property means you no longer have to give away your money to something that isn't building you equity. Because when you pay rent on an apartment, the money just goes out the window. But with property, you're paying off a loan, you're paying towards something you own yourself. So it makes more sense in the long run and from a financial standpoint. The second decision you have to start to make is what kind of property you want. The three primary types of properties you'll see are going to be houses, single-family homes, condominiums, and then townhomes. Now, there's no set rule on what you should go for, right? It's all about preference and it's all about what you want in a property. A couple big differences between single family homes and townhomes / condos is that with a single family home, you are responsible for all of the exterior maintenance of your property. So with a home, you have to worry about your roof. You have to worry about, the siding on the exterior of the building. You have to worry about the lawn, the lawn service that goes into it, right? And if you buy a home in a neighborhood, for example, in an established neighborhood, sometimes they'll have community rules that you have to follow. Things like your grass can't be taller than 6 inches or something like that, right? With condominiums and townhomes, you only own the interior of the unit. So everything exterior is going to be managed by the HOA, the homeowners association. And that includes things like the roof, repairing any kind of sidewalk or pavement related issues, if they have a community garden or any kind of community features. And with condominiums and townhomes, you'll typically pay an HOA fee, homeowners association fee, which is money that the HOA uses to repair things like the roof when it's time and repair the siding when it's time. With a single family home, you're kind of on your own, but that could be better because you're not then having to pay for those HOA fees every month. Okay, so once you decide what kind of property you want to pursue, or at least you have an idea of what you want to pursue, the next step is you have to build your team. And by team, I mean you need to have a real estate agent and you need to have a broker for your mortgage, a lender. Real estate agent is going to be responsible for helping you view properties. They're going to be responsible for helping you schedule inspections, and oftentimes they can also refer you to lenders. A lender is the individual that works with you to shop for the best mortgage for you. Because essentially when you're buying a home, unless you're paying all cash up front, when you're buying a home, you're taking a loan from a bank or some kind of financial institution. So a lender will actually take your information, take your credit score, your income. They'll collect all of the documentation about how much you have to work with. and how much you make each year. And they'll shop for the best rates available and then help you sign up for those, basically. So they'll be handling all the financials. Now, a couple things to avoid. You definitely do not want a real estate agent who is also a lender. I haven't had personal experience with this, but I've heard horror stories of them sort of abusing the system. So it's always great, just for the sake of checks and balances, right? Finding two different people who can handle two different aspects of the process, because there's a lot of paperwork that goes into the financials, as well as the real estate side of it, the inspections and so on and so forth. It's good to have people that know what they're doing and are specialized in what they do, not one person who kind of does everything, if that makes sense. And then the other suggestion I have is don't use an online service. There are all kinds of online lenders, online real estate agents that say they can get you the best rates online. And in my experience, from what I've seen and what I've researched, those are not usually the most legit. They are much more susceptible to scam you, especially with things like wire fraud. Wire fraud is huge in real estate. Stay away from the online companies. Find somebody you know and trust. If you're in the Seattle area, I can give you some suggestions because I actually shopped around quite a few different lenders. So I can give you some suggestions here. If you're looking elsewhere, just go through an online search or contact a real estate company. Honestly, like Redfin, if you read the article I included, the first agent and lender I spoke to were from Redfin. Now, they didn't end up being the ones I worked with, but it was through them that I was able to meet other people who did it and finally found the people that I worked with. And you want your real estate agent and your lender to be people you trust, people that you can have a conversation with and not feel like they're withholding from you. And a lot of that comes down to personality. So who you are as a person, find somebody who will actually care. I'll give you an example. One of the first lenders I contacted was a guy who sold properties to, multi-million dollar, investors and just crazy business philanthropists who didn't even care to see properties. He closed deals on multi-million dollar homes for people that have owned property for years. Me, being a first-time buyer, I was not in that position, so I had a lot of questions, and I wanted to know how this worked because I didn't want to get screwed over, right? He didn't necessarily have the time for that, and he didn't want to humor it, and it's nothing personal. It's just his clientele are different than who I was, a first-time buyer. So be mindful of that, find somebody you trust, and get ready for the next steps. Okay, so the next step now, once you have your lender figured out, once you have a real estate agent, it's about getting a pre-approval letter. So a pre-approval letter is something from the lender that says this person, is eligible to spend this much amount of money on a home. And it is a legally signed document from the lender saying that, you can take this paper to a seller's agent, somebody who's selling property, and they will see that and say, okay, this person can spend this much money so we can proceed to discuss, closing on this potential property. The reason it's important to get a pre-approval letter before you actually start shopping for homes is that you want to know where you stand financially, right? There's a few different formulas that lenders take to evaluate how much you are really eligible for to purchase. And I don't know that formula offhand, but it may be less than what you're thinking. So after you give all your, paperwork to your lender so they know where you are financially, they'll give you a pre-approval letter. And that pre-approval letter will tell you how much you can qualify for in terms of a loan. But then once you have that pre-approval letter, you can actually start going out to homes. And if you see one you like and you want to proceed on it, then you can actually, that pre-approval letter is sort of like a vetted permission slip that says, yes, you can actually continue with this home if you want to purchase it. That way the sellers, the person that's selling the home doesn't waste their time with people who walk in and say, oh, I want to buy this, but they are not even, vetted by the banks yet, right? So getting that pre-approval letter will be a great next step.